Welcome back to Real Talk, Real Advice, Real Difference. This is the podcast where we bring some of the extraordinary people in the world and expose it to people. And usually these people here come from humble beginning. They're just like normal people and done extraordinary things. And James, you're one of them. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in. James Laughlin, in 7 times world title as a drummer.
That's right.
2 times solo and 5 times in a group. And then obviously you also led a team of school kids to become world champion. Thank you for coming in. Tell me a little bit more about that. And if you could please just introduce yourself, just let us know anything that I didn't say.
Hey, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on the show and gifting me the time to share some insights with your listeners. It's a real gift, so I appreciate it. So I've been here for 16 years in New Zealand, and I grew up in Northern Ireland, a beautiful country, however divided heavily by religion. I grew up witnessing some things that I'd rather not have witnessed, but they were also leverage and inspiration for me to get away from Northern Ireland to find other opportunities. And so my hobby, which was drumming at the time, became a fanatical obsession. I'm very competitive. You and I have chatted about this off air before many times. I'm competitive and I wanted to push myself and see what was possible. So I went to the World Solo Drumming Championships for the first time at 13. Very naive, just was rocking up to throw my hat in the ring and see how it went. When it came to the results, the announcement at the end, I was shocked and flabbergasted to find out that I was crowned a World Solo Juvenile Champion.
Wow.
The first time. Next year we went back and did it again. Me and my dad headed across, and at that point things started to change. So the phone started ringing from Vancouver, Canada. There was a university there, the Simon Fraser University. They had a pipe band and a drum line, and they said, hey, we'd love to welcome you over to Vancouver, check out life here, play with the band, and go to the World Championships with us. So I got to do that. I got to see that there are other places around the world that are much different than Northern Ireland. And I headed across. At that point, the phone started ringing again. I won another World Championship that summer, and it was Christchurch, New Zealand. Now you and I are sitting here right now, but when that phone call came in, Nathan, I had no idea where New Zealand was. Where on earth is this? Dad, where is it? And so we discovered that was the All Blacks place. So like great at rugby, Jonah Lomu came to mind. So this school said, look, we want to become the first Kiwis to win the World Championships. And you've managed to do it by that stage, I think 4 or 5 times. And we had young kids, you're not that much older than them. I was 19 at the time.
Wow.
Would you come down and show us how to build a world-class drumming program? I said, yes, however, I want to negotiate a few things. So first, I'd like to upgrade from a sofa, which I was sleeping on in Vancouver, to a bed. I was like, you can get me a bed, that'd be great.
Interesting.
Secondly, I'd love my permanent residence. So if you can guarantee me a pathway to permanent residence, I'll be there and I'll not leave until I've created a program that's world class. And so by the time in 2013 when they won the World Championships, I had got my residency. I'm now a citizen. I classify myself a Kiwi. I support the All Blacks rather than Ireland in the rugby. And that's how I ended up here in beautiful New Zealand.
Interesting upbringing. Tell me, just before we dive into your becoming world champion, what was your upbringing like?
You know what, Mum and Dad were incredibly present. Grandparents were ever present as well. Spent a lot of time outdoors. Dad was a hunter and we had lots of dogs, working dogs, so spent a lot of time with him and around farms with farmers, and very humble beginnings. I'd say we grew up working class. Mum and Dad worked very hard. Mum worked for the government as a civil servant. My dad was a welder, still is. And I'd say my grandfather had a big impact on me. He left school at 14, had a horse and cart, delivered coal all around Belfast. Grew up on the Shankill Road, and there he witnessed some atrocities. It was arguably one of the roughest streets in Northern Ireland. So you've got the IRA and you've got the UVF, 2 terrorist gangs.
Right.
And the IRA stronghold is on this street called the Falls, and the UVF stronghold is on the next street called the Shankill Road. So my grandfather had a really big impact on how I thought about life, how I engaged with people. I feel that he has helped me to be a communicator and to influence people in a positive way. So yeah, humble beginnings, but really impactful, that time I spent with my grandparents and my parents.
What makes life so interesting, what makes life so good and so cool is like some of the most amazing people on the planet were born with nothing, and majority of them actually born like in adversities, or they had to overcome adversities. So you're no different than most those people, of course. Tell me, you said you learned a lot from your grandfather. What were the lessons that he taught you?
You know what? Be very, very strong with your values. Know what to stand up for. Have something to stand up for. And he would always say, you know, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. He was a very passionate man. And I remember when I was a kid, someone's grandparents said something. It was something like we borrowed hammers and nails, going to build a tree house. And this hammer and nail came from my friend's house. And we didn't return the hammer and nail, we left it in the tree house out in the forest. So the granny came up to me and said, "You've taken it and you haven't returned it to me." I remember my grandfather going down and he gave her an absolute earful. I thought he was pretty full on. I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "You always stick up for family." He says, "And I know who you are. And I know that you didn't steal the hammer. The hammer's sitting up in that tree hut." So I've learned a lot from him, and sometimes those situations, and they've been in professional situations in previous organizations that I've worked as an employee, sometimes I've stood up and spoke my mind, and it's not always popular.
Yeah.
But when you have values and morals, you stand up and you speak and you're heard. So that's probably one of the strongest lessons he has taught me is, believe in something and stand up for it.
How cool is that? How cool is that when we're little kids who watch our parents and grandparents do something, whatever they do, however they do, is it good or bad, we actually do that in later in life, right? If it's hard work, if somebody grew up in an abusive family, they abuse their partners and things, well, that's what it was. That's what the norm was, right? So kudos to your and salute to your grandfather, obviously. That brings me to you winning the world title. Tell us a little bit more about that. What age did you start, and how did you become a world title from this little place called Northern Ireland?
Yeah. So at school, again, this was the principles kind of coming out. These inner principles. At school, there was a kid being bullied, and I was very much like an in-betweener. So I'd always hang out with the rugby guys, but I wasn't a rugby guy. I'd always hang out with the studious, we called them geeks back then, hung out with them. But what I would do is I'd be the glue. And so if somebody was being picked on, I would generally know who the bully was and be like, "Hey, dude, let's cut it out. Like, that's enough. Leave Johnny alone." And Johnny would be fine. This one time it just didn't stop. The bully kept going. I says, "Look, you gotta stop." No, it didn't stop. I says, "Look, there's daffodils there," because it was spring. "You're going to have a daffodil sandwich if you don't stop. Now we can talk about it and stop, or you can have the daffodil sandwich." They didn't stop, and they had the daffodil sandwich. So I ended up in the headmaster's office for doing the wrong thing.
Right.
I seen it as the right thing, Nathan. I was stopping the bully. The headmaster said, "Look, I've got to do the right thing. There's got to be a consequence for this. I know why you were doing it. Thank you for that. However, it doesn't look good. There's other ways to solve the problem. So you've got two options. One is a week of detention." I was like, "God, my mum's going to kill me." "Or you can have this set of drumsticks." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Look, this set of drumsticks, you'll turn up every week on a Tuesday after school and you get a drum lesson. Do it for one term, we'll call it quits. After that, no problem." So, okay, that sounds great. So I turned up. This old man was teaching me. Well, I thought he was old. He was probably like 55. Right. He was teaching me. I was loving it. I had a sense of purpose. He was giving me feedback. My headmaster came in after 2 weeks and said, "James, you're doing really well. Like, keep it up." And after a term, I was hooked. And I was always in the headmaster's office for the right reasons after that. And what I didn't know was the headmaster was a leader of a pipe band. he had a shortage of drummers. He was using his position.
Really good for him and for you too.
Totally. It was a win-win. So him and I are still great friends. He's in his 80s now. We still communicate. And he was the guy that started me on this drumming pathway. And I used to skip school. He was my primary teacher, but at high school I used to skip school to sit at home and practice. And the basics, these basic little, we call them rudiments. But essentially if you think of business, it's practicing the basics like lifting the phone and making the sales call. Practicing the basics of, hey, here's my script, here's the things I've got to tick off. I was doing that in a drumming sense. I'd happily do it 8 hours a day. On a weekend, I would do 20 to 24 hours on a weekend. So social life diminished, but I did not care. I was so passionate that I wanted to be the best that I thought, what would my competitors be doing? Oh, they could be practicing right now while I'm socializing. Okay, cut the socializing out. Let's focus on the goal. And I didn't see it really as a sacrifice. I seen it as a commitment. Like if I want to be the world's best or be even in contention, I've got to do what everyone else is not doing. So if they're going to socialize, I'm going to not do that. And so I just got really committed to that and headed across and give it my best shot.
Wow, thanks to the headmaster, huh?
Yeah.
And I'm sure he got what he wanted.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So from there you went to become a world title. How long did it take you? Like what kind of commitment it was, obviously? How long it went for before you became the world champion?
Yeah, so I started when I was 9.
Yeah.
And I was world champion when I was 13.
Right.
So 4 years. Yeah. And I honestly, Nathan, I'm sure you can attest to this as well, that when you're passionate about something and you're very clear on what the outcome is, things can happen a lot sooner than you imagine.
For sure.
You know, so I think for me that was a shock that it came that quick. But I've seen it happen for my clients, I've seen it happen for athletes. When you want something and you know really exactly what it is,
Yeah.
you might think that'll take me 20 years.
Yeah.
But in 3 years' time, it's there, you've done it.
It's interesting how
Yeah.
how it works. So you've got the world title once, and then why you do it twice? So you want a world title once, because they say if you do it once, okay, it's an accident. Like it can happen. You can win a world title. You can become a top salesperson. But if you do it consistently, and do it again and again and again, tell me more about that. Like, what's the secret behind that?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Like I've got a definition of high performance that I'll share with you in a moment. But look, after I won it once, there was a gentleman in Canada who contacted me. He was 30 years my senior, multiple time world champion. And he came over and he said, James, well done. Well done on your first world title.
He came to Northern Ireland.
It was Scotland at that point. And he said, well done, but I'll see you next year. Let's see if you can do it again. He's like, once, that's good.
Sure.
But let's see what you're made of. Can you come back and do it again, back to back?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, whoa, it kind of burst my bubble a bit. I was like, dude, I'm trying to celebrate this, this big win.
Yeah.
But it planted something in my mind that he's right. If I could do it twice,
Yeah.
whoa, like that's believability.
For sure.
That's like a track record. And so, yeah, I went back the next year with confidence, with more self-belief, and went through the quarterfinals, semi-finals, and made it to the finals. And then was really fortunate again to win it that next year.
Yeah, fortunate, hard work, whatever you want to call it. And then you had a group of people that win with you, and you won it 5 more times. Yeah. Had that you were leading that group, I'm assuming.
So no, I wasn't leading that group.
Right.
And so arguably one of the world's best drummers of all time, a guy called Lee Maxwell, he was leading that group.
Okay.
And so he was probably 30 years my senior. Very much an idol, role model, someone I had literally learned by saturation what he did and how he did it. I went and played. So he was the leader of that group, and I was one of the members. So I was performing, I was adding my bit, but whilst I was there, I was watching, I was listening, I was asking questions, I was taking notes, because I want to learn from the best.
That's smart, because I was just talking, we just put up today something about choosing a mentor. We talked about the T theory. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
The theory, the experience.
And then you got the application. An application. This guy here, who was you were watching, and you were seeing what he does, and you were copying it. That's the guy who has done it, and who's actually doing it, and who's got the world title. And you were like, okay, now I just want to see what you're doing, right? The best kind of mentor to have. What did you learn from him?
I learned lots about what to do, and I learned a few things about what not to do.
Right.
And I learned from him that you've got to outwork your competition.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be on the very edge of creativity and innovation. You cannot rest on last year's result. You cannot rest on last month's outcome or today's. You've got to keep moving forward to the future and keep really innovating. I would say at that stage, he was very passionate, and from a leadership standpoint, sometimes that passion flowed over and became a little, he lost control sometimes in terms of how he led. So I learned some things there around what I would try to do different. And I have to say, I failed a lot in my early years in leadership, and I could actually empathize why he was so frustrated with us young guys doing our thing. So I learned way more from him about what to do than what not to do.
Interesting how from practitioner you learn so much, and some of the things that the best of the best learners, like, you know, anybody that I know who's done anything worthwhile have got somebody to look up to, just like somebody like you. So what was his name?
Reed Maxwell.
Reed Maxwell, right? So Reed Maxwell was your man, and then from there, so you got that word title again 5 times with a group of people, and then you came to Christchurch, you negotiated your permanent residence, and then you got to the St Andrews College to become the world champions. How do you lead a bunch of young people to become, or coach them to become world champions? Because I'm assuming at that time these guys here they were all right, and they were not world champions, of course. How did that go?
Yeah, so to me there's 3 ingredients, and I would say I don't have secret sauce. I am not the person that comes and waves a magic wand and everything's great. It's none of that at all. I just understand some principles and then know how to apply them. So there's 3 things: skill set, mindset, and heart set. And when you think of the skill set, so that was me coming and going, okay, you drummers are good, but you've got some bad habits. Technically, you've got some bad habits. And in business, that could be that, you know, you have a meeting at 9 a.m. and you turn up at 9:05. That's a bad habit. You need to sort that out. It could be that when you go to close, you talk about it a little too quick, you get a bit too excited. You need to slow down and relax and be confident. Drumming's no different. There's certain things that need to be done really well if you want to be world class. So the first, I would say, 3 years was just focused on getting the skills, just the skills, skill building, just the basics. Also building the team. There was 12 drummers in the program when I joined. So 12 students. There was 85 when I left. So like doubling, tripling, quadrupling the size of it. It's so important. You need numbers, whether that's in business or in sport. You need to be able to pull on numbers, because people will atrophy, people will quit, people will get injured. So really, when you're building a skill set, you need to build it with numbers. The second part is the mindset. So after those 3 years, they were capable, for sure, of being world champions. So we went to the world championships and they came 5th. Okay, why did we come 5th? So we started to look at the mindset. Okay, yeah, we went to Glasgow. It cost us $200,000 to get there. We had 4.5 minutes to perform. We felt a bit nervous. I said, okay, I get that. That makes sense. Why did you feel nervous? So we started to unpack the mindset and the beliefs. Then we come back and I'm working the next 2 or 3 years on the mindset of performance, dealing with nerves, using practical tools like breath work, emotional visualization skills for them to perform their performance before they go to the world championships. Then after that, the heart set, and that's the belief. And I used stories, and I still do that with Canterbury Rugby. I run the mental skills program, and it's very much storytelling. My objective is to get the person in front of me to get out of their head and into their heart. And so with these kids, that's what I was doing. I was spending a Saturday morning with them, sharing stories, emotional stories about people who started with nothing and made it to the top through passion, commitment, self-belief. And by the time they got to Scotland in 2013, they walked differently. They carried themselves differently. They had confidence. It wasn't cockiness, but it was an overflowing confidence. People could see them coming. The week before, the reigning British, UK, European and World Championship band came over to listen to our young kids. Went, this is amazing. Like, where did this come from? Like, you guys have just been quietly working away. You just all of a sudden showed up and this sounds amazing. They knew we were right on their heels. And so the day of the World Championship, we knew that they would be our biggest competition. but we removed them from our mind. It's like in real estate, if you're always focused on your competition, you lose sight of who you are. Get busy being busy and following what they're doing. Stick to your knitting. And so I said, guys, who cares what they're doing, how they're playing, how big and bold they sound? We're great. Stay focused on us. They went out and delivered. They had the skills. They had this rock solid mindset, and they did an absolute heart set and belief that they were capable. And in the end, they were crowned world champions.
Wow. Talk about the success is 80% psychology and 20% mechanics, right? And you talk about mindset and heart set. I just want to double click on that because skill setters, there's a lot of people who are very skilled, but they don't go far because they haven't got the mindset and the heart set. Can I just get you to elaborate a little bit more about the mindset and the heart set?
Yeah.
What can you, if somebody's like really good at what they do and they've got perhaps been around for a little while and they good at what they do, right? But they haven't got the mindset or the heart set. How do you get better on those two things?
It's like a muscle. So to me, mindset, when we look at defining mindset, it's a set of beliefs that shape how you see the world and yourself in that world. And so these beliefs will around money, around relationships, love, success, failure, your beliefs, and you have them. Everyone listening right now has a belief. You and I have beliefs. We firmly believe those. We're fused with those beliefs and they are reality. I believed Santa was real.
Yeah.
Of course he was. He was real. That was my belief. Nobody could have told me otherwise until I was like 7 or 8. So the first things first is if you want to develop a mindset to complement a really good skill set, you've got to start understanding what your beliefs are. I call it your BS, your belief systems. So what are your beliefs around success, time, connection, hard work? What do you believe about that? And how do you figure out those beliefs? You simply say, I believe life is, or I believe money is. So I believe money grows on trees.
Right.
People listening will be like, no, it doesn't. I was told money doesn't grow on trees as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I always had this fixation around scarcity. Like I better hold my money and be careful with it, and there's never enough, and I better try and find other ways to earn more and hold on to that. I don't want my son to think like that. That blocked me, Nathan, so much. I kept hitting brick walls.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, well, like that's a big goal there. But then I look around the corner and this guy has got a 10x or a 100x goal. I'm like, how does he think like that? Why does he think that's even possible? So I had to rewire and say, money grows on trees.
Sure.
And you and I have chatted about this off air before, but that tree is your mind. And you water and feed that tree through reading books, listening to great podcasts like this, going to seminars. That's how you feed that mindset. And then the heart set, that's the best part. It's about you and me sitting here. Like there's a heart on heart connection. Our heart sends out this electromagnetic wave. If you're having a bad day, I also get to experience that bad day.
Sure.
If you are elated and sending out great vibes, I feel that. So the heart set's about making sure you've got great people around you. Success at the end of the day, without fulfillment, is the ultimate failure. And that was Tony Robbins that coined that perfectly.
For sure.
So I think you need to have people with you on the journey, and that's the heart set. Sitting alone in a room on with cryptocurrency by yourself, maybe foreign exchange, I'd be miserable. I don't know about you.
Tell me more about. Okay, well, you were born in Northern Ireland. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was born in wrong side of town, right? Like, people have got those kind of things. Like, you don't know what it was like. You know what my upbringing was like. I grew up in a poor family. Like, what are you talking about, Jab? Like, how do you brainwash you, and how do you change the thinking, the belief that you had? Like,
there's got to be a pattern interrupt. Like I had a James Laughlin pity party that went on for a long time. I was feeling pity. Oh yeah, I've got some more tea, thank you. I was feeling pity about my lack of money. I didn't have a university degree. I'd been a waiter in a hotel. Like, what can I do? And I play drums. Like, I'm never going to amount to anything. And so that went on for a long time. But I think you need a pattern interrupt, and they come in different ways. A major pattern interrupt could be the death of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
It could be bankruptcy. It could be the loss of a relationship. You know, for me, around that 19 stage, I was drinking a lot and partying a lot and traveling the world. It was, you know, I thought a very extravagant lifestyle, but there was lots of hangovers. Sometimes I was blacking out. So it came to a point where I was like, everything I'm building towards here as a drummer at this stage, I could lose it all. Reputationally, it could go. And this book somehow made its way into my hands. And it's called The 1 Minute Millionaire by Mark Victor Hansen. So Mark Victor Hansen's one of the greatest thought leaders on the planet. He's done a lot with the movie The Secret. He was heavily involved with that.
Yeah.
So I read this book and I'm like, this can't be real. You can think and grow rich? Like, no, that's not, this is nonsense. I'm like, okay, well, how about I give it a try? How about I just try it? And 6 to 12 months later, after trying some of the principles in there, it's like, oh, I've doubled the amount of money I can earn. This is pretty cool. Okay, how about I try this for another 6 months just to make sure it wasn't luck? And then all of a sudden, I met a beautiful partner, and more opportunities came in. I wrote a book around drumming. It was a bestseller. I was like, this stuff actually works. So what I'm putting into my mind through this book, which was part of my pattern interrupt, that changed my belief system. And that's where I started to think there's actually an overabundance of money, of clients, of love. It's out there, but it's not out there unless you think it's out there.
Yeah.
And so I just started to think differently.
It's hard reconditioning. It's not easy. It's like swimming upstream when you're trying to recondition your brain, the upbringing that you had, or whatever it was. There was a story about there was a twin was one of them ended up in jail and the other one ended up very successful. Asked the one that went to jail, what happened? Like, well, what do you think? Somebody upbringing like mine, the father was alcoholic, he was abusive, he was mean to my mother, left my mother at a young age. What do you expect a child like that grew up in that kind of upbringing would turn up like, right? Well, I mean, ended up in jail. And asked the same question from the guy who was very successful, and he said, like, what do you think is going to happen from a guy who were brought up in that kind of environment? I said, they did it. I'm never going to do it. So it's how you wire your brain, I suppose. And it's not easy. I understand it. Like you said, like you got a success, small success after small success after small success, and that becomes a habit, and you're like, wow, like this is so good.
Yeah, when you say that, it makes me think of one thing, and that is your perception shapes your reality. So whatever you perceive, that's real. And so everyone that's around us today that we've met with, and everyone that's sitting out there, their perception is their reality. We can't change that. And so the only thing we can do is change our own perception. And that is the heaviest lifting a human can do, is the inner work. That's the hardest bloody stuff to do.
Interesting. I'm a big fan of inner work. We'll come to that in a minute. But one of the important thing is the environment that you brought up in, with the environment that you work in. The best way to change who you are, to change your environment.
100%.
Then the identity, the skills, and the belief, and the values follow off the back of that. And I suppose that's exactly what you did. Went from Northern Ireland to Canada. From Canada, come here and look at you. We are now. Talk to me about inner work, because I know you're a big fan of you're a 5 a.m. right?
I like to get up bright and early, meditating around 5:30 every day.
Tell me about the inner work, because I think the most important thing one can do is to go inside, because we think that everything's on the outside, and of course the industrial world has taught us that everything's on the outside. You go buy a next car, you become the word title, you're gonna be successful, you're gonna be happy, right? But the truth is you're only happy for 6 months, or you would certain girl and you're only happy for like 6 months, and then 6 months later you hit the wall, right?
100%.
Unless you do the inner work. Tell me about your inner work, and what is the routine that you do, and how did you come across this thing called inner work?
Yeah, great question. So I think most of us are not naturally inclined to want to do inner work. Thinking is hard. Thinking is, for some, even traumatic. because you have to go inwards. Like, there was things in my life, so like we talk about world championships and people are always like, oh my God, that must have been amazing. I'm like, it was for about 3 minutes. And then the day after the world championships, whether I'd won it or I'd lost it, I had a thing called the post-worlds depression. And so many of my other fellow competitors felt the same way. State of loss, state of depression, almost grief. Because we'd reached this big milestone and then it was like, yeah, but then what?
Is that it?
Yeah, totally. And so alcohol was such a great friend in those times. And a lot of my peers that were competitive, we would celebrate together with alcohol. We would drown our sorrows with alcohol. It let us escape. And what I didn't realize, Nathan, as I was moving towards goals and achieving them, I wasn't actually celebrating them. And I wasn't looking around me to see who was with me to celebrate them. And so there was these dopamine releases getting released every time I'd achieve something, but it was never enough. I wanted more. It's like I needed a hit, you know? So for me, that kept happening, and it culminated in my marriage dissolving and separating. And that's a big turning point. That's a moment where you go, oh, put the brakes on.
Sure.
Look inside for a moment. Like, how did that happen? You once were deeply in love with this person and wanted to spend every waking moment with them. That's no longer the same. Like, what has changed? And so that was a big pivotal moment for me. And I was doing some work prior to that, but that was like, okay, stop, take stock. You need to really assess what life means to you, where you're headed, how you're going to get there. And so, you know, thankfully that relationship with my former wife is a great relationship. We're great friends. We spend Christmas with each other's families. She house sits for us when we're away. It's amazing. We've learned a lot from each other. But what I've really learned is that you've got to continually do work. And for me, that happens in a very tactical and practical way. People talk about woo-woo and all that. I like to keep things super simple. So in the morning, I meditate. Very simple meditation. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, other times it's 25, 30 minutes. But reflecting inwards, focusing on breath, acknowledging thoughts and coming back to breath. That sets me up for a radically different day. I'm less reactive, more responsive. A practice that stacks on that is journaling. I talk to some of my closest people, and like, the greatest thing I've ever discovered is journaling. I love to journal. And I was telling my partner Caroline the other day, see that journal? If I was to lose that journal, someone was to pick it up and just read through it and apply some of those things, like, that's life altering. Like, to me, there's so many things in there, and it doesn't make me special. There's nothing about what I put in there that's special. It's just my inner thoughts, my inner desires, my dreams, my struggles, my shortcomings. And probably the toughest thing, I think all of us have this to a certain degree, is self-loathing. And to have self-love, you've got to figure out how to move through self-loathing. And so at times in my journal, there's times when I don't like who I am. There's times when I have to figure out why I'm worried about that, or what somebody might think, or how I show up in certain ways. And so those practices are very simple for me, but are really powerful.
The simple things are beautiful. Now you're one of the thought leaders in when it comes to leadership. You've got a podcast, which I want to say congratulations on the podcast, on the year that you became. Your podcast is the #1 podcast in New Zealand in leadership. How cool was that?
Special.
How cool was that, man? Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Tell me about leadership. I'm very curious because obviously I'm interested in leadership. I've thought when you open a company, then you all of a sudden you're a leader, right? Well, that's not how it works, right? And most leaders have got either they got a degree and they become a leader, or their parent maybe owned a company, they passed the company on. Leadership is hard. Leadership is hard work. Tell me, why did you become a leadership coach, if you will, and what do you see? Tell me first of all, why did you become a leadership coach first of all, and then we can talk about what makes the best leader on the planet.
Yeah, look, to me, it's really simple. Leadership is influence. And if you're not influencing, you're not leading. And that comes with inspiring, so you inspire and empower people by being a leader. But everything in the world rises and falls on leadership. You look at war, that was a leadership decision.
Yeah.
You look at poor economic management, leadership decision. You look at poor culture at work, that's a leadership decision.
Yeah.
So to me, I was like, that's fascinating. I really want to work alongside great leaders and good ones. And the good ones, I want to help them become great. And the great ones, I want to walk alongside them and figure out, what can I learn from them? What can I bring into my own business, into my own life? And so I'm really passionate about constantly uncovering what leadership means, how it applies in different settings. And I truly believe that when you treat leadership as a journey rather than a destination, I mean, you're onto something pretty special.
Sure.
So the CEO that comes into one of my events, I'll say, hey guys, hands up who's a CEO, a GM, a business owner, and a bunch of hands go up. And everyone who doesn't have their hand up is kind of looking their head down. I say, great, all you guys that got your hand up, leave your titles at the door. They mean nothing today. And I mean that of deep respect. They've earned those titles, but they haven't earned leadership. Leadership is earned 1 minute at a time, every single day, every interaction you have with a team member, a customer. So I say, look, we've got to be a level playing field, and leaders have open minds, growth minds.
And leadership, it's hard work, man. Like, I'm like a young leader, still 36, and I opened the company at 28, I think it was. So becoming a leader and learning from the mistakes that I made, whole lot of mistakes that I made. I hope that I'm a lot better than what I was when I started the company. People certainly think so.
I bet.
Yeah. Tell me, like, with your leadership, like, how did you, the people that you work with a lot of leaders, obviously you interviewed some of the best leaders on the planet in your podcast, which is
Lead on Purpose.
Love it, with James Laughlin. We put a link below to that thing. I'm not sure if we can get you your ranking any higher than what it is, but we'll try to help.
That's amazing, thank you.
Tell me what makes, from your interviews with leaders, what makes the best leaders the best leaders?
Look, there's principles, like proven principles. I would go as far to call them laws of leadership. And if you can really adhere to those and embrace those, great leaders just come to the fore. So I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people over the years around leadership. Some people who have small companies, some people who are running countries, some people are running Formula One teams, all different types of people. But these 7 different things kept coming up. And I call it high performance leadership framework. This is what I take all my clients through. So for the listener, I'll share with you what those are. So number 1 is vision. Like every great leader I've ever had the privilege to meet or study, listen to, they're very clear on where they're headed.
Yeah.
And that could be this year, it could be 5 years, it could be lifetime vision, but they're always clear where they're headed. After that, belief. That belief system, they have a very deep belief in their ability to learn. They have that growth mindset, which is, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I know I can learn and I can grow. So that the beliefs, they're very much fine-tuning those beliefs. Then desire. I don't really like saying motivation because I look at motivation as very temporary. Desire is deep, and nobody can stop a person that has desire. Or a wild animal that has desire. If that wild lion, it has a desire to kill that antelope, and you want to stand in its way, good luck to you. I'm not helping you with that one. Nothing will stop the drive of desire. And then after that is self-discipline. Whether they're on field or off field, or whether they're athletes or CEOs or agents, brokers, you've got to have self-discipline. And that looks very simple, like wake up times. What do you do when you wake up? What does your routine look like in the evening before you go to bed? What do you consume? Food, alcohol, drugs. What's going into your body? After discipline, the next big thing that I noticed was habits. High performance habits. Great performers in any field are creatures of habit. And you've either got good habits or bad habits.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. Then self-evaluation. Did you know that Kiwis are the least likely to be introspective out of the Canadian, British, and American counterparts? They're the least likely to go inwards and ask themselves questions and reflect on their actions.
Why is that?
Great question. I'm on a mission to figure that one out.
Interesting.
This
Is it because you got it so good or what?
Maybe. It's what's interesting about that, Nathan, is that I struggle with it because the Kiwis that I engage with are very engaged in introspective routines and reflection and journaling and planning. But I think that as a nation we've got a long way to go. But there's room to improve, and there's tactics we can embrace. The last but not least pillar is growth. And I always say that, if you look at a great leader, they understand that you can either grow or decay. You can do one or the other. You can't do both at the same time.
Sure.
And so great leaders are committed to ongoing growth. They're at the seminar at the front of the room taking the notes. So the people at the back of the room on their phones who've had 2 wines at the lunch break, they're going to start to decay. They're going to fall behind the leaders. So the best people in your industry, the top 1%. So in fact, for the listeners, a guy they should check out is a friend of mine called Jay Papasan. And buy his book, The One Thing. Absolutely amazing.
Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. I just listened to their podcast today. It's called Think Like a CEO. Gary Keller. So keep on going. It was absolutely amazing book. The One Thing. We put a link to that as well.
Definitely, absolutely. So Jay Papasan, when you look at what his whole formula is, and with Gary, figure out what your one thing is. And so if there's someone listening right now that's selling homes, getting listings, that's your one thing. You want to have 2 side hustles on the side? Good luck. You'll be in the bottom 5% of your industry. Double down on what you're good at. Be really clear on what your one thing is, and then every day drill back to what's my one thing today? What's my one thing before morning tea? Make that your priority. And I think that the highest performers, the people that are going to outperform, are the people who are clear on their vision and stick to their one thing.
How good is that? How good is that, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing. So you said you're a competitive guy. You said I'm going to come back to competition, because obviously leadership's important: vision, belief, desire, self-discipline, habits, self-evaluation, and growth mindset. Obviously you've got the competition. And how do you build that thing called competition? Are you going to being competitive? Is that something that you're born with, or something that you can learn over the years?
I think it's comes down to having something that's deeply meaningful. So when you have a goal that's deeply meaningful, you will be competitive in achieving that. So if people get in your way, you're going to push them out of the way. So let's go to as simple as a football game, and you're a young football player, and your dad was pretty handy with the football, and he was well known around the village as being a good footballer. Well, you want to make him proud. So you want to get on the A team rather than the B team. And so you're going to rock up and you're going to run a bit faster and you're going to tackle a bit harder. You're going to do what it takes to get on the A team because it's deeply meaningful for you to make your dad proud. Now that can be applied to business too. I want to make mum and dad and granddad who put me through this good education, I want to make them proud. So I've got to be the best broker, I've got to be the best agent, I've got to be the best CEO. And so you become very competitive. So I think it comes back to having something purposeful, something really deep intrinsically that drives you. That's where competition comes from.
Amazing. This is great. I can talk to you forever. I know you're a busy man. We've been talking for about almost an hour.
It's flown by.
Absolutely. As I said, I could talk to you forever. Tell me, is there anything else that you would suggest to somebody, a leader maybe who's having a little bit of hard time, or a salesperson? What would you suggest if there was one thing for them to do? What would that be?
If they're having a hard time?
Yeah, if they're having a hard time, they're kind of doubting themselves. And
look, get clear on who you are. Like, write the question down. Who am I? And I've had times, probably a good example is to share a personal experience. So I had been interviewing people for a few years. Different people, different backgrounds, some online, some in person. I held an event for 10 of my clients, a very private, invite-only event, and I invited a former head of state, so a prime minister, to that event. And the day of the event, I knew I had to interview that Prime Minister in a very intimate setting with 10 of my most incredible clients. And I was sitting chatting to Caroline, I said to her, I'm bloody nervous. I am so damn nervous. Like, should I write the questions out? Like, should I write them out and have them all prepped? And I'm scared that I'm going to screw this up, and this Prime Minister's going to think I'm an idiot, and the clients are going to go, what on earth was James thinking? He's hitting way too high. And she said, James, what would you tell your clients if they came to you with the exact same self-doubt that you're showing right now?
What a question.
It was great. She was my coach,
right?
In that moment. The people closest to us can often be our greatest coaches. And I says, oh, well, I'd ask them, have you ever done anything similar before? And she said, well, have you? I was like, well, yeah, I've interviewed tons of people. Cool. How did it work out for you in all of those times? Was there any ever disasters? And I said, well, no, I've done that. That's fine. Yeah, most of them went really quite well, actually. Have you had any positive feedback about how you show up as a performer, or in this case, an interviewer? I was like, yeah, I've had some really good positive feedback. Cool. And she said, who are you? I went, James. She went, no, what's your full name? I said, James Laughlin. I'm laughing at it at this point, like, what are you playing at? She went, that's right. You're James Laughlin, and don't forget it. I was like, thank you, I really needed that. I so doubted myself, Nathan. I was freaking out inside, and I needed her to get me out of my head and say, I'm James Laughlin, and hey, here's what I've done. And that's it's not an ego stroke. It's not a, hey, I'm amazing, I'm better than everybody. It's a, hey, I'm really at a low place. I really don't think I can get this one across the line. I need to build some self-love and self-confidence back up, that belief. And I took my own medicine. It was with my partner's help to say, what would you say to a client? I said, well, that's easy. I'll just say these things. I'll ask them these questions. And that helped me. So hopefully for the listener, that'll serve them. I don't know if it will, but
how good though? Because I think we just been talking about going inwards, right? Because I think, like you just said, like it's going inwards that's going to give you all the answers. It's working on your mindset and your heart set. If you're a leader, if you're a coach, if you're a salesperson, once you go inside and you figure you out, then the word takes care of itself. Like what I say, the word is a mirror, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
That's been an absolute privilege to have you here, man. I can talk to you forever. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, James.